welcome to another edition of Cooking with Captain Ed. Today we're going to be talking about home recording. What I've got is probably the premier home recording DAW, digital audio workstation. It's called Reaper. You can go to Reaper, REAPER.FM to download it. It's free to download. It is a fully functioning trial, and I don't believe it expires. They count on the goodwill of people to pay for a license, which is a whopping $60 US for two full versions. They're currently on like version 5.961. So if I were you, what I would do is download this version right now, or when you're ready. It's currently December of 2018. And once version 6 comes out, go ahead and buy that, because then you'll have all of the updates through version 6 and through version 7 up until they release version 8. And to give you an example of how long that lasts, I bought version 4.5 or something in 2012. And I'm still on the same $60 license at version 5.961. They update it quite a lot, and it's an outstanding workstation studio, and we're going to go through some of that today. What we're going to do, just to give some people who've never been exposed to a recording studio an idea, we are going to take a look at what it is and what it can do for you, and we're also going to kind of take a quick look at kind of where it began. So in order to do that, I'm going to open up a photograph, and I'm going to minimize myself, or let me see if I can turn myself off. I don't know if that did anything. Doesn't look like it. I'm going to do this. Yeah, I turned off the wrong one. I'm going to go small. So this right here, this is a Tascam or TIAC 144 cassette multitrack recorder. These came out in the 1970s, and you see right in here you put a cassette tape, and here are your 4 faders and your master stereo fader. You select what you're recording to, and I'm honestly, trim is the input level, and there's a bunch of different stuff, and there's some basic bass and treble and panning left and right. I did my earliest demos on a unit just like this, and if you're a fan of Bruce Springsteen, he recorded the entire Nebraska album, all of it, on one of these machines. It uses, if you look at a cassette tape is, 2 sides. It's 2-sided tape, stereo, right? So that's forward, left and right, and backwards, the flip side, left and right, which is 4 channels. So with the case of this, you used all 4 channels going in the one direction. And if you wanted to record more than 4 channels, which I always did, you would have to record your first 4 channels, and then you could bounce them, is what they called it, and you would mix them down to 2 stereo tracks, and then you could add 2 more tracks and mix them down to the stereo track. You get as many tracks as you wanted then. However, the minute you recorded additional tracks after that first mix down, you couldn't change any of their levels or panning or effects or anything ever again. So let's move away from that and bring up what we work with today. All right, what do we work with today? This is called Reaper, and I'm going to get almost entirely rid of myself up here in the corner. So, hi, you can't see me. And so what we have up here in the corner, I'm using my Axifx as my interface. You might choose to use a Scarlett 2i2 or a 2i4, Focusrite Scarlett. These are some of the best home recording units out there. They're fantastic. They plug in by USB, just like the AXFX does. And they connect here in exactly the same way. Now, what I'll do is we'll take a look at some of the preferences here. So the audio system is set to ASIO, ASIO. This is what you want it set to. There are others for direct sound or wasabi. You don't want to use any of those. The standard, the professional standard is ASIO. I don't exactly know why, but I know it's faster and more efficient at handling, so you get less latency when you're working with it. Latency is the time that it takes from when you hit your note until it hits the tape, the virtual tape in the recording. And what you'll notice is that if your latency is very high, then even though in your head you're playing right along and locking in tight, if your latency is way off, then when you listen back to it, you always sound late. You know, the drum beat may be on time, but you just seem to come in, you know, just a half a second late on everything. And that's what latency can do. Can also, if you're just kind of listening along while you're playing, it can really throw you off, especially if you're playing something faster. Latency is always there. You cannot get away from it. You cannot avoid it, but what you can do is minimize it. So anyway, here we've got that. The ASIO driver that I'm using right here is from Fractal Audio Systems, FAS. I've got the first and second inputs in so that I can get a good stereo input. I'm using the outputs the same. I can, here, this is specifically for the AXFX. I've just got the status and the buffer settings. You know, I could move it to, you know, minimum latency. I'm just going to leave it at standard because it's fairly safe, and we're going to close that out. But this would be available down in your corner down here when you have your interface attached, whether it's an AXFX or Focusrite or whatever, it would appear down here. And all of this theoretically should be set up when you install it, as long as you have your interface connected. So let's say you go out today and you buy a Focusrite Scarlett, okay? You buy it online, 2 days from now it comes in, you plug it in, you install the drivers. By the way, they may come with a CD with drivers. Always go to the manufacturer's website and download the latest version of the drivers, specifically for your equipment, okay? 1 second. Install the drivers, get your equipment connected and working, and then you're ready to go out to the website and download Reaper and install it. The download package is very small. It's like 11 or 12 megabytes. You could download this over dial-up if you had to. In fact, the driver package for the Scarlett is probably bigger than Reaper. But don't let that suggest to you that it's not full-featured. It really is. It is literally, I think it's better than Pro Tools, where a lot of the functionality is almost identical for almost everyone but you know, seasoned professionals. It has much less overhead, much less latency built into it, and you don't need to have a physical dongle or any of M-Audio's crappy digital rights management stuff attached to it. Terrible. I avoid it. If you're recording at home, you have no need for Pro Tools anyway. The basics of a digital audio workstation are going to be mostly identical. You're going to be working with tracks, recording to tracks, and adding effects, and then mixing. All right? So we're going to go from there because I don't want to drag this on too long, but we get this configured, and we're going to go, okay. So I'm in my DAW, and I'm ready to work. What do I do? So I'm going to come over here, track, and insert a track. Very simple, right? And what I can see is I've got my track up here, and then I've got, this is the fader for that track down here. And if I go ahead, let me see, I haven't actually recorded in a long time, so let me see, how do I arm? So I arm it that way, so now it's armed to record. If I turn on, let me see, all right, you can see we have got some signal there. And And that signal is running a little bit too hot. So I'm going to bring this down to about -4 here. It's been a while since I've worked with this. Maybe I need to adjust the trim level. No, I can't remember. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead. Let's see if I can edit this out later. We'll try it and we'll see how it sounds. But first, actually, what I want to install first is I want drums. I need something that's going to keep time. So actually, let me go back. I'm going to remove this track. You know, one of these days, I'm going to learn to, just the delete key. One of these days, I'm going to learn to go through this stuff before I start recording. I'm going to go track, insert a virtual instrument track. And what I'm going to use, let me see, come on. And bring this over here. I've got my virtual instruments. I've got Easy Drummer. If you're working at home and you need a drummer, and you don't want a drummer who will sleep with your girlfriend or eat all your food, you get Easy Drummer. Fantastic product. And okay, so this question here is asking me basically, do I want like to fully multi-track the drums? Do I want everything going out to different tracks so that I can adjust toms and pan this and that and the other? That's a little bit more advanced, and I'm going to say no, so that it basically just puts the drums on one stereo track. Okay, and there you can see I've got the one stereo track, and there I can hit. Okay, and this is a modern basic kit, so yay! Alright, so I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to look for a basic beat. And 4/4 straight pop rock. Let's see. I don't want to get too complicated, so I want to keep this short. Okay, so that's good. Do I want to go a little faster? If I do, alright, so right now the tempo is set down here at 120, and it's also set here at 120. I can change that anytime that I have just the MIDI instruments, just the drums here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, well, let me start with a count in. Okay, let's start with that. That's a good kickoff. Let's start with that, and then we'll go to pop rock, and I'm going to take two, and there's other ways to do this. I'm just doing it this way so that I can see the sections this way. All right, and then I'm going to go to let's see. I don't want a hat. I want something with like maybe a China boy or something. Bell. Here we go. Let's see. That's cool. All right. We'll try 4 of those. All right. And that's that. And now I have to remember how to insert this into my track. I think there's probably other ways to do it, but we're going to go this way. again, there are better ways to do this, but I don't remember them right now. So this is a good start. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going a total of 9 measures. Okay, so 7, 8, and 9. Just bring it over to the end, right there. Come on, dummy. Okay, and now I'm going to close out this. It's still inserted, it's still here. You can see that this is an Easy Drummer track. Okay, I'm going to turn off the record light there. I don't need this, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. That got inserted by accident. I'm going to zero back to the beginning. All right, so that's cool. That's a start. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to insert a guitar track. Okay, so I insert track. I'm going to call this left guitar. Okay, there's a school of thought that when you're recording the melodic instruments, your guitars, pianos, whatever, especially guitars in a rock context, there's a school of thinking that you record a rhythm guitar that's hard left, a rhythm guitar that's hard right, and then you think about doing one up the center. Okay, so I'm not going to go fully hard left. I'm going to pan this 75% left. Okay, and then I'm going to create another guitar track, and I'm going to call this, whoop, I'm going to call this, surprise, surprise, right guitar. Okay, and this one, pan this one, 75% right. A stickler for the exact. Okay, so, all right, so there we have the two guitars. I'm going to record the left guitar first, okay? So I want to enable the record, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and hit record here. Notice I can also just hit Control R on the keyboard instead of using the mouse. So if I want to, really be able to come in, I just hit Control R. See, that cymbal is still ringing out. Okay, cool. So we recorded a guitar track. Now if we listen back, so we can hear the guitar in the left-hand side. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enable the right channel. And I'm going to record the right guitar. And let's see if I can remember what I played. A little noisy, a little crappy in there, but we got it. Okay, so we have a basic 3-track, well, really almost 4-track, because we got all those drums crammed onto one track. And let me turn that off. And so if we listen back, we can hear all right, so We brought the levels down in the guitars a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to move this master bus down because it's tapping out up here. We're getting into the red, and we don't want to do that. So let's listen back to that again. Let's see. All right, so that is, I mean, basically we've just recorded, drums. We'll have to come back and do some bass, and you know what? I'm going to insert another guitar track. Put it up to the top. Let me drag it down to the bottom here. Let's call this lead guitar. Anybody else ever have trouble when they try to type out the word guitar? They just doesn't work right. Lead guitar, nonsense, because I'm just going to noodle and be a dick. I'm going to enable the record light on this, and I'm going to hit Control R. All right, now as you heard, that really was total nonsense, but we have the basics of it. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the record on that, and then let's bring it in. I'm going to leave that lead guitar pretty much up the center. All right, well that's interesting. And now what I'm going to do right now, it's going to take me a second. I'm going to pause the recording a little bit so I can pick up my bass and tune it and get going with that, and then we'll pick up in a second. The magic of the wipe. Whoosh, cut. Okay, so I am back and I've got my bass guitar, and I'm going to insert a track for it, and then we're going to do a little FX tweaking. Let's call this bass. And just because I'm a bit of a stickler for having things where they belong, I'm going to bring the bass up to here. Because typically when you're doing a recording, you'll start with your drums and then your bass and then your rhythm guitars and your clean guitars and then your lead guitars after that. Your mileage may vary. You can do it however you really want to, but that's how a lot of people choose to do it. That's kind of how it was done when I was kind of coming up in this and working on my TIAC. So that's kind of how I arrange it. You know, you can arrange however you want to, but no matter what you do, remember, always tune your instrument. Okay, so here with this, I'm going to go and I'm going to add an instrument, and I'm going to add, this is one of my favorites, and this is a virtual bass amp. I've got my Axe Effects set up so that it's only using using it as a bypass, using it as a true studio thing. So this Studio Devil virtual bass amp, I can make some adjustments. I can use some presets, and I'm going to try and see deep tune. I want to monitor this, so let me. Take my breath away. Funny. Let's see. This doesn't seem to be coming through. I'd have to turn chord marker. So I'm going to record this. I'm going to record it dry, And then we'll maybe we'll, and then we will we'll go ahead and make adjustments to the tone if we want to. I don't have any kind of thing worked out, so I'm just going to kind of hit 8th or 16th notes and see where it goes. Now, I don't know about you, but I barely heard that, and that's not how I would do it if I was recording this bass. Mostly I would record the bass first, but let's see if in the playback we can get a little bit more out of this. Let's get our FX open. Okay, we've got this, so let's see. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to isolate the bass. I'm gonna hit solo. Not Han Solo, but this will just solo out, so all I can hear is the bass. And here, what I can do is I can change right? I kind of like that. It's really quick, getting near kind of a sound that I like. So I'm going to leave that tone, pardon me, I'm going to leave that tone there. And we'll close that out. And now we just need to find how it sits in the mix. Oh, we need to turn. Let's see. All right, so that is a really, really crappy riff, recording, bass track, everything. It's all terrible, but the idea was not to write an amazing new song. The idea was just to demonstrate how home studio gear works. Now, if you're going into a studio, whether it's a studio that has a real hardware board, just like that, or if it's a virtual board and they use Pro Tools or whatever, the gist of it is going to be the same, and it works essentially the same. Like if I'm playing this back and I want to mute the drums, okay, mute. Oh man, I want to get rid of this lead guitar. Mute the lead guitar. All right, so crummy recordings aside, you can use S to solo out individual tracks. When you use S, only the tracks that have S glowing are active. When you use M, that's mute. The tracks that are glowing with a glowing M, those tracks are muted and everything else is still active. You can adjust your volume. There's a lot more depth that we can get into, especially if I spent time getting my feet wet again with recording. I don't think I've sat down and recorded anything on a multi-track in probably a year and a half or 2 years. Certainly want to change that, but it clearly wasn't going to happen before I promised I would get this video up. So that's why you get garbage, and that's why you get confusion. Not that I'm not always confused, but that's basically it. And when you're looking at your master output down here, I'm going to start this track over, and we want to keep an eye here. So you want your master track to not even get into the yellow. It's not like old style recording where you had a low noise shelf where you had tape hiss that would get onto a recording, or you had room ambiance from a microphone, and you wanted to have the loudest instrument possible and the loudest recording possible to minimize noise. When you're using an entirely digital signal chain, you don't need that. Now, if you're putting a microphone in a room to record guitars, and you're putting a microphone up against your cabinet and running it into your DAW, your best antidote there really is having the guitar loud. The louder you have the guitar, the lower the noise that will go along with it. But when you're recording direct through an XFX or a Kemper or whatever, none of that's really there. And with a drum machine, essentially the same thing. The drums, they've all been recorded professionally. You're just dragging bits and pieces of them in and making them work. So you can work with that there. But this, once you have everything recorded, you can do your panning, adjust your panning, listen back to it. You can have multiple sets of speakers and headphones. You want to be careful when you're doing it to not listen back to your mix too loud. Our human ears have a tendency, when the volume gets way high, we have a tendency to kind of levels and kind of blend everything roughly together. So you want to listen back to it and mix it at a comfortable low volume. You want to make sure that you can hear everything, but you don't want a super metal party. You just want to be hearing it at a comfortable level. You don't want to be driving the speakers or your headphones too hard to where it introduces noise, and you can just go to that. And when you're done with that, here, we'll come back and we'll take a look here. So, hey, I'm cool. I got this track. I'm done. I want to mix it down. I've got my levels. Everything is cool. So I'm going to go to File, Render. And I'm going to render this file. Let me bring this back over here. I'm going to render this file. Let me turn the volume down to the bass and then set it down. It is literally a Walmart bass. It's a first act. So, I'm going to just go to my desktop and I'm going to call this Crappy Test. And so it's going to put this as a wave on my desktop. If you're doing something, serious, you want to output it as a wave. 44,100 hertz, that's CD quality. You can go much higher, but 44.1 or 48 is pretty much, your best bet. You're not going to be going in mono. You're probably going to be going in stereo because you're not mixing, 8-channel polyphonic. And resample mode, really, I'd go for, better. Go for the best that you can, assuming your computer can handle it. And I'm going to leave, because I'm just doing I'll leave it as wave, 24-bit PCM, blah, 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 everything cool. Okay, and I'm just going to render one file. This is a very short thing, and it's easy, so it's done. Now I'm going to launch the file. It's going to launch in the Crappy Groove Music player. Interestingly enough, one of my own tracks that I recorded a long time ago, for some reason, gets mislabeled as a Cypress Hill track. I don't get it. I got nothing. But that's not Cypress Hill. So that's that. And now the track is rendered. I can go back and I can take that track. I can listen to it in my car. I can listen to it in my family room. I can give it to friends to listen to, and then whenever they come back and say, the bass was a little too loud on this speaker, I can come back and I can, tweak some EQ settings. If everyone says it's, the bass is too loud everywhere, then I want to turn the bass level down. But if it's, the bass is too loud in my headphones, but it sounds great in my stereo, then there's some different kinds of EQ that you want to do. Again, that's getting into some advanced stuff. We just want to get you able to record some basic stuff so you can get your ideas down and start recording some basic demos. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or drop an email to cookingwithcaptained@gmail.com. Or if you're on the Synyster Gates School, you can pop a question in there because I'm sure I'm going to post this as a thread there. And check it out. And good luck. And when you get to recording, I want to hear it. So bring it around. Thanks, everyone. Keep rocking.